Sup, guys? Basically, during the fortress battles, I was told to pretty much hold Stronghold 4. As you might imagine, whenever you're taking over forts and you're trying to hold, the main thing is at least for the most part, it's usually down to who has the better troops, who has the better gear. Now, in this situation, I have the better troops, but I don't have the better gear. So I'm fixing to take a bunch of hits from like two different alliances, mainly QSY and then a OSRS guy. You remember the last video? Well, Fox is once again trying to take Stronghold 4, and will he actually get it? That's yet to be seen, right? Now, of course, whenever you're going into this, if you're wanting a few pointers with fortress battles, I can tell you that you can basically send the top tier troop you have. If you've got an alliance that is competent enough to know this, they'll know that they need to be sending things that are... Obviously, you're going to be wanting to buff the rally as much as you possibly can. So any of your attack buffs that you are as the lead, as the captain, super helpful. There's a lot of healing in between, so if you had stacked up healing speeds prior to this, you're doing yourself a favor. But for the most part, 99.9% of the effort that's put into this, as you can see, it's really just a matter of refilling. So once you've gotten hit, you need to refill with a garrison and making sure that you're refilling with the top tier troops you have. And then you just rinse repeat, basically. Now, I won't recommend anybody try and hold and take a bunch of hits like I did, because I've come to realize that it might be easier to attack it. But you gotta remember that, in the early game anyway, the biggest advantage you're going to have is the fact that if your command level's all the way maxed out, you're going to have a higher rally size. And then there's deployment capacity. And if you don't know where all of that stuff is, basically at the top left, you see where there's effectively like a little arrow. You tap that, and then you'll want to pop deployment boost so you can increase the amount of troops that you're sending, because that's going to give you that much more. Now, obviously, I recommend that for the captain, not so much for the fillers. The fillers, if anything, if you can't get the rally full, then yeah, that might be necessary. But for the vast majority of the time, you're not really going to worry about it, And if anything, it's basically a numbers game at this point. So they're just thrashing the hell out of us. They're trying very hard to send solos and stuff like that to weaken it just enough that maybe their rally will finally kill and clean through. And the main thing is just making sure you refill every period. It's one of those things that it's for about half an hour, it's nothing but pure terror. And if you can't hold it, then that timer resets and you have to go back and forth until either one of you finally concedes and lets go. Now, there is obviously the possibility that instead of conceding, that they try to outweigh the timer. And the timer's one of those things, if you check in Fortress Battle, it'll tell you what that fort's time is. And that way you have kind of an idea. It's about 2 hours, I believe. So you don't have a lot of opportunities to kind of just like, how do you say, delay your time? Like you basically got to try and hold this thing if you can, because that's going to eliminate a lot of the headaches involved in it. Outside of that, though, man, I talk about a freaking bunch of hits, though, man. Now, I'll have some reports here. We'll look at them for a glance, but I just cannot stress how much of a difference that it's made. Now, Kamikaze's come a long way, so we've really kind of gotten quite far from where we were. We're actually doing fairly well. It's just now we're in the middle of kind of a, how do you say, it's the server that we're in, they're having intermediate questions of authority, I guess. One guy thinks he's bigger than everyone else, and another guy thinks he's bigger than everyone else, and it's just a giant shit show between basically all the major alliances fighting over control over things and trying to set server rules and boundaries for everyone to follow. And naturally, obviously, those are going to be contested, and people that challenge those are always going to be in the, it's always going to be seen as the aggressor, right? Now, the thing is where I kind of stand on this, and this is my experience with alliances in general, is it's like, basically, if you're in the middle of a proxy war like that, and you're having to deal with basically the top-end, high-end, pay-to-win players, and, it's localized, right? And that's one thing that's kind of advantageous about this game compared to like Lords and others is it's like at least it's isolated to just your server instead of like being surrounded by a bunch of pay to wins, which makes it even worse. Like I honestly feel like now the absence of not having super pay to wins in one area is actually advantageous because at least you don't have to deal with a guy that's been playing the game for like 3.5 years. Like everyone's on a level playing field, which is really nice. Outside of that, though, I mean, it's level as level can be, at least in server age, I guess, if that makes any sense, you know. But it's still a game won and fought by whoever's wallet's bigger, and that's name of the game. It's always been that way, right? But one thing you can say is the collective gain of what a group of people can do does matter, though. I mean, having a group of players that all have T9s and T10s is going to triumph, even if the guy that has a bunch of decent chief gear and decent stats is the lead. Because he's always going to struggle if he's not throwing at you the same or close to the same amount in troop type. It's just a freaking slog for them. And then the thing is they got completely massacred in a couple of these rallies. Like, they lost so much. It was unreal. It was probably worse than last time. How bad it was. I mean, I left this not having any score in Brother in Arms, and I already had Brother in Arms completely maxed out by the end of this. So this thing was an absolute slog. But outside of that, really, I mean, I will say that, as you can see, I've got the Jack-o'-lantern march, which is kind of cool. I'm really kind of liking that, and now that Halloween's kind of over, it makes me kind of wonder what we'll see next. But more or less, that's pretty much stronghold battles. It's just you're having to basically sit there and slog it out with whoever the heck you're up against. And I feel like in some ways, though, like the one challenge that I see that happens really frequently is that, like, okay, so you get hit a couple of times, then you need somebody to fill. And one of the things that's often ignored is that March accelerations that people could be using and they choose not to use. Because obviously some of these people are spending, some of them aren't. But I will say that, like, it's worth its weight in gold whenever you're sitting here and joining a rally and you're like 10, 20 minutes away. It's like the guy that sends that is never going to be able to join. He's never going to be able to fill. And there's also, like, the guy that sends like 1,600 troops. It's like that guy needs to stop. Like, you've got a total maximum of like 70 some odd thousand you can send, and you're sending like 1,600. So you're actually, even though you're in the fort, you're actually replacing a human being that could be in there with more troops. So in some ways, it's also kind of, it's a little problematic from time to time. And even though people have decent troops in that march, if it's only 1,600, it's like it's not worth having it in there. It's like it's kind of frustrating at times, but that's the thing about stronghold battles is it's this constant thrashing that it's. I would say on average you probably burn like a day or two worth of speeds just doing fortress battles, because of just so much carnage that goes into it. And thankfully, it's like the first couple of times that we've gone through this, we've gotten away with it pretty unscathed compared to like the alliances that we've been up against, and I think it's really in part because of the fact that we really focus down on the fact that we got to have the highest tier troops in there. That's really made a huge difference. Now, I will say that, having chief gear is obviously a plus here, but one of the things that, like, you'll see here is I don't have the best chief gear. I'm actually behind a little bit against some of these guys, and so it was a close match. Like, a lot of the times they would come on and swing, and then you'll see here I wasn't paying very close attention there, but I was filling with those smaller, weaker tier troops there. Only a couple, though, but, that was bad habit there. Because it's easy to like want to refill, and then when you refill, I think that's honestly how people get low tier troops into their marches anyways. They're just sitting there clicking and sending, and they're trying to get it back in there as fast as they can. And that's the only thing. In some ways, you almost kind of need to like build a formation and have that formation set for that. Just tap the formation, then send, and get into the habit of doing that, as opposed to like just sending full send. Because if you do a full send, you'll actually make that mistake too, which, I don't know. I basically try to keep my low tier troops to a minimum. I try to get rid of anything more than 1,000. I don't ever hang on to them for that long because you can just promote them. And that's honestly, if you want my 2 cents, between the people that say to promote versus not promote, I'm like, okay, stupid, just promote, upgrade them all, and get them all to the highest tier, and just rinse repeat. Like, you're you're slowing yourself down, obviously, if you're like training only a few hundred at a time, that you could be training up to like 700, for example. It's like, obviously you got to focus down on efficiency, but whatever that maximum is, you need to be, if you've crossed that threshold, promote them all, because you're just going to get by so much further. But overall, that's pretty much how that whole ordeal goes most of the time. It's just, as you can see, it's like, I don't know. I don't even know where to really go at a stretch here, but well, let's take a look. Like there are 208,000 injured that March. Like, yikes. And then, obviously some guys send solos and stuff, but it's like that's a nasty amount. And then you have, just a comparable March back to back. And obviously they lost 4,000 in that perma loss, which isn't much, but still the wound bill for between the two rallies that they sent there, that was a doomsday level event for them, and it's like that was all they could swing. After that, they pretty much just they put in the towel, that was pretty much that for them. They just let it go, and that was it. They were not willing to go any further, and that's just, it goes to show that if you can hold it, obviously this is what you can kind of expect. But gosh, man, it gets troubling when you get up against people that are getting higher and higher tier. It's after a certain point you start to worry that maybe you too will get wiped out eventually, and that is kind of something that I've thought about. So I've been trying to kind of min-max my research now and trying to do that, because one of the things that a lot of people ignore is their battle tree. Like, if you don't do your battle tree, you need to do your battle tree. The battle tree is a big, big chunk of where you're going to get your deployment capacity increased and your stats. And you need that in order to really be competitive against a lot of these players that you're fighting against, especially in Fortress Battle, of all things. So, naturally, if you ever want to learn more about your stats or your core stats, if you see where that little muscle hand is by your profile picture, tap that. And that will show you all the stats that you have. And it's a super helpful thing. And I don't know why it's not said more often. It's kind of like one of those things that it's not very clear until you do it. And then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about once you see it. But needless to say, I can't go at any length further than this. This is pretty much where the buck stops here. But if you'd like to subscribe for Whiteout Survival, that'd be awesome. Leave a like, and I'll see you guys to the next video.